Welcome, dear listener, to the very first hour of Midnight Broadcast, where timeless tales echo through the night. Tonight, we open our doors into the swirling mist, where shadows stretch long, and the past whispers its secrets to those who dare listen. Let this be your escape, a space where old voices murmur in the dark, where the flicker of candlelight dances against worn wallpaper, and where the stories have been waiting patiently for you to return. Before the world of high-definition screens and endless notifications, there was radio. Just a voice, a crackle, and the boundless imagination of the human mind. Tonight, we revive that magic. You're about to hear stories resurrected from the golden age of radio horror, retold with gentle ambience, soft narration, and respect for the era that birthed them. Settle in. Pull the blanket a little tighter. The fog is rising. They say it started with a face in the window. Not the kind you expect. Not a face of someone lost or someone looking in, but of something unnatural, unmoving, and deeply wrong. George Wilton lived alone in a third-floor apartment overlooking a quiet, gray courtyard. His routine was dull, but comforting. Morning coffee at precisely 7:15, 2 sugars, 1 cream, mail by 9. Never anything interesting. Then, he'd sit by the window and read. Though more often than not, he simply watched. One November evening, as the mist began to curl through the alleyways below, George saw it. Across the courtyard, in an apartment that had long stood empty, a pale shape stared back. A face. Round, expressionless, with wide dark eyes and no sign of life. He blinked. It didn't. At first, he told himself it was a trick of the light, the mist playing with his tired eyes. But the next evening, it was there again. And the next. "Mrs. Halbrook," George said to his landlady one morning, voice trembling like the teacup in his hand. "I believe someone's in the unit across from mine." She peered at him through thick bifocals. "That apartment's been empty for 3 years, Mr. Wilton. No one's even shown interest." "I saw a face," he insisted. "Well," she said, with a tight, forced smile. "Perhaps it's time you took a walk, dear." But the face never left. It was always there by dusk, in that same third-floor window. Not watching, not breathing. Simply there. And slowly, night by night, it began to change. Its eyes seemed wider. Its mouth, though closed, suggested some creeping smile beneath the surface. George stopped leaving his apartment. He watched it from morning until night, terrified to blink, terrified to turn away. One stormy evening, he found himself drawn to the building across the way, drawn like iron to a magnet. He stepped into the lobby, empty and cold, then climbed the stairs, past peeling wallpaper and dim bulbs flickering in protest. 3rd floor, room 3C. The door creaked open without resistance. The apartment was bare, except for one thing. A mirror, tall and standing, placed precisely in front of the window. He approached it slowly. At first, it reflected only the dark room, but as he stepped closer, his reflection vanished. And then he saw it. The face. Not in the mirror, but behind him. And George Wilton was never seen again. The fog has a way of stealing names, doesn't it? George's tale is not unique. Others have whispered similar accounts, but they rarely end so neatly. Our next story circles around a different kind of horror, the type that taps gently on the window, scratches beneath the floorboards, and waits in the corner of your vision. They called it Death Has Claws. It began in a sleepy little coastal town. The sort of place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing bad ever happens. Until it does. Emily Marin worked nights at the town's only hotel, a crumbling building that smelled of mothballs and sea salt. Room 206 had been closed for years. A pipe had burst. The ceiling sagged, but that didn't stop the light from turning on every night at exactly 1:03 a.m. The first time, she assumed it was a mistake. Maybe the circuit was faulty. She turned it off. The next night, 1:03, on again. Then came the scratching. Not loud, but steady. Long, deliberate movements, like claws. The old maintenance man, Carl, had heard the rumors. Room 206, he said. Ain't no good. Last fella who stayed there, fella named Tom Hensley. He slit his wrists in the bathtub. Said he heard someone under the bed, whispering to him at night. Emily laughed it off. Or tried to. But on the fourth night, she brought a flashlight and a camera. At 1:02, she stood outside room 206. Silence. Then 1:03. The light flicked on. She opened the door slowly. The room was unchanged, dust thick in the air. She stepped inside. The scratching began. She shone her flashlight beneath the bed. Nothing. Then, into the closet. Nothing. But when she turned back around, the bed was no longer empty. They even found Emily Marin. But room 206 remains locked to this day. And some say, if you walk by just after 1 a.m., you can hear the scratching start again. Stories like these have a way of finding us. Not because they're true, but because they might be. Let's move deeper now, into a story called Echo of a Mind. It's not about ghosts. Not in the traditional sense. It's about guilt, obsession, and the echo we leave behind when we do wrong. Frank Delaney was a quiet man. Lived alone, taught piano to neighborhood children, and rarely spoke above a whisper. But Frank carried a secret. Years ago, in a moment of anger, he had struck his brother during an argument. The fall was accidental, the death immediate, the guilt eternal. He buried the body beneath the floorboards of his music room and sealed it tight. No one ever suspected. For years, the silence held. But one day, while teaching a young boy to play a nocturne, Frank heard a second piano join in. Soft, slightly off-tempo. No one else was in the room. He brushed it off. A memory. A creak. But it happened again. And again. Every time he sat to play, that second piano would join. And with it, the faint sound of breathing. He stopped teaching, boarded up the music room. But the echo followed him. In the walls. In his dreams. In the spaces between notes. And one morning, the neighbors found Frank slumped over his piano, fingers still pressed to the keys, eyes wide open in terror. They say music never dies, but sometimes it plays itself.